Right then, Liam here. So, another Saturday, time to do a little bit more on the valve amp. So, I've been coming up in here this week, just doing a little bit here and there. So I've been doing some of the wiring on the tag strips. So I've got the anodes are wired up to the tag strips, the grids are wired in, the heaters are wired in, and the cathodes are wired in. So obviously I've got to put the wires up from the chassis to here. So that's today's job. I've got to wire in the switch. So in the chassis I've done a bit more, all the signal wiring's done, everything in the chassis is now wired in. So I've just got some, this sort of messy spaghetti amount of wiring at the back here will hopefully all reach to where it wants to be and tidy up quite nicely. Obviously once this is all, it should look quite nice once it's all a few cable ties on there. Dawned on me the other day, when I was sizing the transformer for this, I did originally calculate for DC heater supplies, and you know, it probably would have been alright on AC. I've been very careful with my twist on the wiring and trying to keep it out of the way. However, as it comes up here, it does run quite close to some signal wires. And again, up here, now, it may have induced some amount of hum, but it just dawned on me, if the transformer's capable of doing it at DC, I might as well convert it. So I've retrofitted, there's a bridge rectifier down there, a bit of heatsink compound. It's clamped to the case as a heatsink. Big smoothing cap. It now comes into the board, is DC, still goes through the same resistors and relay networks the same way. There's then a second smoothing cap here after the resistors. They turn a kind of, this will be a very rough sawtooth wave with some noise riding over the top of it as it comes out of the rectifier. So it's got some more smoothing, that sort of makes it quite a nice sinusoidal, almost high ripple DC supply. And there's a final bit of filtering after all the wiring, everything right at the socket of the input tray. That's not soldered on yet. So, you know, if there's any valve on the chain that wants to quiet DC, it's going to be this one. So that'll be good. Yeah. Obviously, I don't want to put a ton of filtering on this because I've worked everything out for 9 volts. If I filtered the arse off it and the transformer could do it, I'd end up with 12 volts DC. So I want enough filtering so I'm not just basically having pulse DC, but I don't want a rock solid DC supply either. So this is low noise. It's a, you know, about a volt of ripple or so. It's good. It works out just about bang on with my resistor values and everything. The amount of capacitance I've got, that's 4,700 2222. So yeah, obviously these post resistor, they sort of work both ways. As the voltage at this point is rising, these are sort of clamping it, and then as the voltage sinks, these are sort of holding it. So they smooth it out. They make the peaks lower and the troughs higher, lower, whichever way you want to look at it. It's not, you know, it takes the ripple right down. So oh yeah, that's to do. I'm not gonna do that until all this other wiring's tagged out of the way. Otherwise I'm just gonna end up melting everything with my soldering iron. So yes, that is today's task. So crack on with this, get this finished wired up, and then it's on to connecting that onto here. So see how I get on. Well, several hours later and a tea break, progress is still happening. So yeah, switch is wired up, just wiring in the tag strip. You see I've started wiring in some of the wiring in the wires, the connections up from the chassis up to this tag strip. Not got a lot left, to be honest. The heater's wired up. I could test the heaters now if I wanted, but I'm going to wait till I've got everything wired up. I'm going to pull the HT and then test the heaters, and then double check, triple check and quadruple check everything before closing the HT and seeing what happens. So that'd be a fun moment. So anyway, yeah, plodding on. So the next section of this video should be this in some mode of operation. we shall see. Right, so the only wiring I have left to do is these anode and cathode wires for the input triode and the signal input to the input triode. I've been meticulous checking my phasing and I'm fairly certain that I've got the transformers hooked up the correct way, to the point being, even if you notice, my wiring's reversed, because if I apply a positive input signal, it's inverted on the output of the triode. On the fed side of the long-tailed pair, it's then back in phase. So the valve, the fed side of the long-tailed pair drives, is out of phase, which would be this valve. So this needs to then connect to the part of the transformer that is in phase with the negative, which it does, and the same for this valve. So, but it's been hard trying to make this so it sort of will hinge back. So obviously I'm going to have to lift this whole thing up and close it again, which is going to be fun. So I'm trying to make the wiring into several small looms that will hinge back on themselves, which they should do okay. Yeah, next to the Hell Vampire build, I'm going to go back to putting it all on the one. Well, you got two options. You either build it all from the bottom and have like your transformers and everything on the top, shielded transformers, or build like some kind of enclosure on top for them to sit in. Or you build everything into the base and you have like either a circuit board with the valve bases on, you have some long standoffs with the valve sockets coming off. So I don't know, maybe one of the... I'm not too keen on valves on circuit boards, but it certainly makes building the things easier, because you don't have to do all this massive amounts of point-to-point wiring. I mean, there is... there's about 15 meters of wiring in here, if not more. It doesn't look like it, but all these twisted wires together, I can show you if I unwound them all, it would come to a lot. So anyway, I'm gonna have a cup of tea because I've still got to wire that up, and I've still got to do the 0V rail for the cathodes and everything, get that right way round. So I feel like having a break. So next part of this vid will be it running to some amount. Right, so as you can see here, obviously every wire connected, lots of resistors. Last thing I wired in was the first triode. Was the wiring just semi-loomed. Obviously I've not put any cable ties or anything on yet, because that's the very last thing to do once you make sure everything's working, you know, because there's a good chance you've got to pull something apart. So I pulled the Molex off for the HT, so the HT supply didn't come on. Didn't have the main power switch anyway turned on, so it wouldn't have come on, but I'd done that for, obviously the next stage would have been test the heaters at full voltage. So I put a multimeter on here. First thing I did was just flick the power on quick, because I wanted to make sure I had indeed got this cap the correct way round. And even in standby mode, wham, straight up to 8 volts on my meter, rose up to about 9, and I just stood here thinking, that doesn't make any sense. Stick my head underneath to look at the valves, and the only one glowing is the input triode, the 6P6S, doing nothing. And here's the funny thing. See, I've been getting the pin out from this data sheet, 6P6S. It's got the pin out on the back of it. Well, I was going to use the 6P6S, but I decided, because of these holes and everything in the top plate on this chassis, I couldn't get the 8-pin sockets in properly. So I decided to use 6P1P, which are a 9-pin version of a 6P6S. They're slightly lower voltage, more or less the same valve. However, completely different pin out, and I've spent, geez, I have spent hours today and hours yesterday and probably some time on Thursday as well, getting all these wires to the right length, trimming them down, trying to make them as neat as possible, everything coming off the pins at the correct angle. And the only ones that match up, I think I can leave the cathode connections in place, because on the 6P1P they're joined internally to pin 8 and pin 3 or something like that, I seem to think. So at present I've got them connected to pin 8. Every other single one is the wrong way round. So the reason I was getting 9 volts was because none of the heaters were connected. It won't have hurt the valves, won't have hurt them in the slightest. It just means, I really thought I was gonna, it's there, look, it's all there. Feedback network, you know, I was gonna just pull the feedback, wherever it is, this one here, I was going to pull that. I was going to test the heater voltages, give them just 10 minutes with the heaters going to get the getters warmed up a bit, burn off any residual gas in the valve because they've been sat for 30 odd years, and then I was going to connect a speaker up, put the oscilloscope on it and try it with HT applied to see how she was behaving. If it all was good, I was then going to push the feedback back on, make sure it still was behaving. That was it. I thought finally, after, it's like a month, well, it's more than a month if you take in the amount of design. I looked today. I brought most of these components in late June, so that was when I first came up with the idea of building this. So basically from that point onwards, I've been sat down chewing over design ideas, crunching numbers, doing the maths, thinking about the board, slowly building everything up, altering it as I've gone along. It's a slow process. When it's a bespoke one-off, you know, you're not just putting up a circuit board, you've got to solder the bits in that you've already designed. Everything's built one component at a time and then tested, because you have to make sure it does function as you intended it to. And then you get to this stage, you get to 11:10 on a Saturday night, and you've been really plowing into it for about the last 7 hours or more. It's times like this there's an important lesson in anything. Failure is a very important thing to have. You learn a lot from failure. For instance, the reason I've spent so long trying to get all my wiring and everything so tidy is because I think back to being, you know, I first tried knocking stuff up as a teenager and it didn't work at all. No idea why not. Never really looked into it. Didn't have the internet back then. Didn't really have the inclination to really go into depth into looking into these big things, and just didn't really bother until I would have been in my early 20s, early 2000s. Internet came along, started looking up bits and bobs of electronics again. You know, it's easy to get hold of parts then. More and more places were popping up. It was no longer ringing people up or trying to fill in forms from a catalogue. You could actually order it like we do these days. Built stuff. First few attempts didn't really work. Did some more research, looked into it. Eventually started getting stuff working. It didn't work very well. It misbehaved, it hummed, it oscillated, it blew up, smoke come out, and slow, steady progression of knocking stuff up until you eventually end up where I am today. But never assume that you just know everything. Failure is important. Failure just always makes you take that extra piece of care next time round. Because when you do something like this, I can assure you the next time I've about to hit a set of valve sockets with a soldering iron, I'm going to very well make sure that the pinout I've got for the valves I'm going to use is the actual pinout for the valves I'm going to use, and not not a mistakenly labelled one or one for the completely different valves altogether. So, oh dear, you know, it'd be so easy, you just feel like chucking it out the window, but that won't help. Getting mad and snipping bits of wiring off won't help. It's going to be, I've got to try and unsolder all the resistors. I'm going to have to get the solder sucker on all of these. These are probably going to need replacing because either the leads will be damaged now after being bent a few times, or they're not going to reach. I'm going to have to replace bits of wire. Anyway, so no running amp. No, I was so certain that this bit of the video was going to be me at least showing you some heater voltages being where they should be, or actually the thing, you know, sat doing probing some voltages, making sure everything's sitting where it should be sitting. But no, instead it's me telling you I fucked it up. So I don't think I can be bothered to do anything on it tomorrow. I've had a hard week of it. My granddad's not very well. He's on his last legs. He's in his mid-90s. I think he's not got long left for this world. So I'm going to go pop down and see him for a bit. Go see some friends as well. And I think tomorrow, I'm not coming up here. I'm not touching this tomorrow. It can sit here wired up incorrectly for another day. It's not going anywhere, is it? So next video will be it working, because there's nothing else to film. I'm not going to bother filming me swapping these over. It will be me from the very off on that video with it working, either with it working with a fault that I have to rectify, or it working playing some music and being ready to close up and spend many hours enjoying. So yeah, anyway, see you next time, and thanks for watching.